So today is August 18th, and we are discussing what an SRE stable counterpart for the GitLab team is and what kind of projects we can work on together, both from the GitLab team and SRE team. So before we get started, I want to drive some context around this, I guess. In the past, scalability team has been the de facto, as Igor said it, the de facto stable counterpart for GitLab when they needed to do some configuration changes when they weren't sure about, or when they needed to roll out something in production. Scalability team has been helping out there, which ended up resulting into the reliability team having little knowledge on GitLab. And it was mostly, like we don't have any in-house knowledge on the reliability team about GitLab. And sometimes we are on call for that service, or sometimes we need to roll out a change for that team because the scalability team is too busy or something. And we don't really have any go-to person for that, and like the managers always end up like rolling the dice on that. So we wanted to have like a stable counterpart for the GitLab team, and as Andras said in the issue as well, like the GitLab team is a bit special in the sense it's its own service in its own language, and it's one of our core product in the sense like it's Git data, so it's right in the name of the company. So I think that what is one of the big drivers for the stable counterpart. We've had in the past stable counterparts for the runner team, and Igor was one of those last year. And we also had a stable counterpart for the fulfillment team for the customer.migration. So we want to build on top of those experiences and make it more official for the GitLab team and have dedicated people for that. Any questions so far on that? Awesome. So I wanted to set up this meeting because we had some async discussions on the issue about some proposals on what we can work on and things like that. But before going through that, I wanted to ask, like, are we creating a solution for a problem that does not exist? Like, do we actually need a stable counterpart in the sense, like, does the GitLab team feel like there's problems that the infrastructure team is not addressing and or has little bandwidth to address, kind of thing? And maybe Andros, you're the expert here on this part.
So this is an excellent question. I think the main issue we could solve that is sort of a lingering time bomb is the lack of specific expertise in GitLab on the infrastructure team. And this affects incident response in particular, but over time, I think it also affects what infrastructure design changes you make that might turn out not to be a good fit for GitLab simply because we couldn't articulate it well and you didn't have the necessary insight to take it into account.
Yeah, agreed.
So to my mind, this is more a knowledge transfer thing, and to like jump very far forward, I think Italy deserves its own SRE team because it's just special and the scope of the company is growing so big that I don't think it's quite reasonable to keep growing individual scope. I don't know how you handle scope in SRE, but I think eventually we will have at least two teams.
Yeah, I think the only answer I can give is we don't handle scope. That's our problem right now. And I think this is one iteration of having stable counterparts. We've tried this before in the past, but with a lot less people in the team and a lot less focus time as well, because we only recently had like 30 people on the reliability team, and now we have kind of the bandwidth to do this. So we don't have that scope at the moment. And I think this is one of the first iterations to do that. So yeah, agreed there.
Excellent. So besides keeping like growing people more into experts on Gitly, which this would do well, we would also then in return leverage the experience that SREs have with running production, which is the largest known GitLab installation.
Yep.
And this, like, yes, we have operational things like production access and things like that, but I see even more value in design work, in co-designing things, especially like what we're doing now, changing the whole way replication works.
Yeah.
It's from a high level perspective, it's from a data perspective, but it's not from an infrastructure perspective. And yes, we will socialize the design. At which point, whoever has expertise has a better chance of jumping into this. And so if we already had built that, and some of you have it, like we would get more value out of this. That's what I'm saying.
Agreed. Yeah, and we can also have like a voice in the infrastructure about the design, because like I saw a comment on some prefect merge requests one day, and like it was between Matt and Jakob, and like Matt provided a point of view from an infrastructure department, and like Jakob said, oh, that makes complete sense, but I didn't have visibility around that. And like I think having that is actually what can solve a lot of problems there. So I agree with that. So you mentioned the re-architecture of prefect, or using Raft protocol not to use Postgres, for example. What's the progress there? Like, where are we at that stage? Is it still being in an RFC process? Like, how is that working?
We had a long internal discussion about the details of it, and now that it seems feasible, we don't think there will be major blockers. We also found that it solves actually a lot of problems that we have. Now, Sami is writing up what was a fairly fragmented discussion on an issue, is writing a design doc, so that there could be a second round of review without having to, piece together that information yourself.
Got it. Okay.
And this is our Q3. And from then on, I'm hoping that this will be blessed by everybody who needs to bless it. And then we can go and implement. The plan is including how do we iterate towards results, and how do we actually get there? Because I guess that's also as hard as the how will it work.
Yeah, and like, does the RFC will the RFC have like a rollout proposal as well, like how we will deprecate the Postgres SQL database or things like that, or is that still out of scope?
I think we need both.
Okay.
Yeah, and we have two OKRs. One is the write a design doc, the other is write a project plan.
Got it. Okay.
And either, like, yes, we will need eventually a detailed rollout plan. The current hope is that it will mostly be by osmosis. So as we upgrade software, the plan is to start using Raft, like keep Postgres, keep everything running as it is. Just start using Raft in the background to also replicate information. And once that works, then we figure out how to switch over and then remove all the Postgres. And that this would effectively take all the single nodes into a single node cluster situation, which aligns very well with our goal of there shouldn't be cluster and not cluster. There should be one code path that everything passes through.
Okay. Awesome. Okay. Yeah. And how can the SRE team
sorry, Steve.
No, go ahead, Igor.
I wanted to go back to the previous point quickly, and just on a higher level, also maybe give a little bit of input from kind of the scalability side. So I think the collaboration has been working pretty well between Gitaly and Scalability. I'm pretty happy with that. There's certainly been cases where we've been a little kind of resource constrained and just didn't really have the capacity. So having a little bit more people available would be useful. Where I see the bigger gap, though, is when it comes to scope. And scalability is really focused on, well, scalability and performance, right? So we've been heavily engaged in optimizing, like we designed some caching related logic. We've been putting into place profiling tooling. So it's very much within that realm, but that leaves a lot of stuff kind of out of scope. And where I see the biggest gaps are operational tooling. And it's already hinted at a bit later in the agenda. We don't have to go into the details right this second, but how do we manage our Gitaly fleet? How do we provision and rebalance the shards? Those are questions that aren't really addressed by the scalability team, and it's kind of outside of the scope of the mission of the team. So that's where I see a potential opportunity for a sort of reliability SRE counterpart to provide more input and provide more assistance to the Gitaly team.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. I guess, Igor, you guys suffer from the same scope growth over time as reliability and like all the infrastructure teams, that it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And
yeah, I mean, I think the scalability managers are a little more protective of the scope. So we're kind of punting more of that responsibility over to reliability, which kind of pushes the problem elsewhere. But I think, you know, we need to address it somehow.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, and I agree that so like jumping on a bit on the proposals for projects that the SRE team can work. So, for example, the C group stuff that from what you just described, Igor, that really falls under the scalability team rather than because that is more CPU constraint, like constraining CPU usage and things like that. Feel free to override me there, but yeah.
Yes
I
and
can
no,
see it,
because
yeah, I can see it going either way.
yeah, it would also prevent outages. Actually,
Yeah.
that's more of the goal of it. It's not that, you know, cost doesn't skyrocket because we use too much CPU. It's more that GitLab comp doesn't go down because we ate all the CPU.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think the negotiation of where the boundaries should lie, I'm going to defer that completely to Andras and other managers involved here. You can fight it out.
Awesome. Okay. Okay. Let's look at the time. Okay, 15 minutes left. So I was gonna jump on to like how can the SRE team get more involved, like the reliability team specifically, get more involved in the design doc for cluster? Is it a matter of just waiting for Sami to write down everything and then we'll just review that merge request, or is there anything else that we can do there?
It's currently in a Google Doc for a faster turnaround of feedback.
Got it.
And
Okay.
I don't know how close he is to actually finishing it, but there's quite a bit written, and I haven't read it myself. I'm just back from holidays this Tuesday.
Yeah. Do you have a link for that
certainly,
one?
Yeah, I think I put this in the whichever notes on the issue. Have I? Blah 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 blah. So
Yeah, there, I think I found it. Yes.
this is the issue for tracking the work around the design doc, which has a link to the thing.
Okay, perfect. Okay. And like, it would be completely okay for us to start looking at it and poking at it and leave some feedback if we find.
Maybe ask Sami, but
Okay.
I like whether this is timely, but yes,
Got
of
it.
course, we want your input and we want your feedback.
Perfect. Okay. Sounds good.
It's just that I don't know what state he's in.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. And okay. Anything else someone wants to add so far? Okay, so looking at the current projects that the SRE team can work on, like for this quarter and the next one coming. So it's pretty clear that support for GitLab cluster architecture direction as #1 priority, since that's GitLab's OKR. So you can kind of tie those two together. There's also the C groups rollout that's ongoing. And I'm curious if should the reliability team pick it up? I know Rachel raised some concerns around that because of ramping up time and like context switching and things like that. I'm curious to hear Andros' opinion on this. Like, is there a lot of work still left? Is there like a big amount of context to gather around it, or can we like kind of pick it up in 2 weeks and like continue the work with the GitLab team to get that ready?
I don't think that's overly complicated, and it's
Okay.
been going in waves, sort of. I need to talk to John, who's been doing the actual work, and I would love for this knowledge of how this works and why it works in that way to be in more than one person's head.
Yeah.
And like maybe Igor, you have more context, but I was thinking of somebody else on the team to also to offload John for other work. If we can start getting SRE involved more actively, not just for, roll this out for us, please, but actually improve on it, that would be awesome.
Awesome. Okay. So let's write down some action items in the agenda. So the first action item, and like this is for me just thinking to write down the OKRs or whatever the stable counterpart is going to be doing this quarter and next for the reliability team. So and
before you do that,
go.
I have a meta question about the stable counterparts. I want to make sure that this is not in addition to all their regular responsibilities, because then they still have the full scope, and it's like some of their time at least needs to be dedicated to this for them to be efficient.
Yeah, no. So from what I understand from Khan, both me and Calliope are going to be quote unquote full-time stable counterparts. In the sense
Calliope.
In the sense that any issues that come up, like for example, I don't know, C groups and the Raft architecture, that's what we're going to start working on next week, for example.
Cool.
That's the kind of commitment that we're thinking about. And also like even when we start discussing like, I don't know, SSH access for the GitLab team, that we can get started.
That was the other thing I wanted to mention, that is something we cannot really do ourselves.
Exactly. Yeah.
And do you know how this actually works and how to make it so that we don't accidentally the GitLab.com?
Yeah. I think we can get started with that next week, in the sense like our #1 priority for this quarter is to be GitLab's stable counterpart, and if that means like giving you SSH access in a limited or in a safe way, and then that would be our P1 and helping out with the raft design and C groups rollout, since the C groups has been happening in waves kind of thing.
There was also this other thing that Jarv got in touch with me for, which is reducing storage costs.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the stable counterparts should get involved in that, even though there is not much from Italy, I think, anymore that can or should go into that as input. We've given our input.
Yeah,
but like just as a on principle, like get exposed to more things Italy.
I've talked to Jarv about this this week actually, and he wants to drive it, and that's completely fine. And yes, we can help out when even us just being aware that costs are coming, and like I know you folks talked about like volume management and like why don't we have volume management kind of thing and things like that. So I think we're aware of that. We're just leaving it up to Jarv, because for us that seems more of a cost savings measure than a reliability measure, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
it is a cost-saving measure, but how it's done
it is, yes,
is a matter of reliability.
That's a good point. Yes, especially if we're gonna end up. Seems like it the simplest way, having downtime on each node. So
yes.
Yeah, that's a good call out. We can keep an eye on that as well and see if we can help out in any way, or at least be aware that things are happening there. So yeah, that makes sense.
So let me turn this around. What can we give you guys to be efficient? We have, like, I don't know how much you know about Italy, the internals and how this works, or how much you want to know. Would you want to learn, like, would you want to watch our new team member videos, or would this be like on the
I would go as far as say, if you can join, if you have your weekly meetings, that would be perfect, because even if we are aware of what's going on
in 5 minutes.
Okay, perfect. So we can join there if you want.
Please come along. I would be delighted to have you. I also hang out on Gitali Lounge.
Yep.
I can add you to a bunch of things.
Yes, do that. Yeah. Okay, and I'll write down an epic with a proposal of the things that we're going to work on for Q3, which would be rough design, C groups, and potentially SSH access, unless we can talk about this async, unless we feel like rebalancing is more of a problem than SSH access. But we can talk to that async.
Is it okay to introduce the two of you already, as you know, we have our SRE counterparts now?
Yes. If someone else says otherwise, then it's my fault. But from all the information I have, it's me and Calliope that's going to work on it. So yeah, let's go ahead with that and roll with it. I also want to open up a merge request today in the handbook as well to make it official and make it like this is what the handbook says, kind of thing. So yep.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Could I get an invite to the Gitly team meeting then? I don't think I've got it on my calendar.
I'm gonna do this right now.
Lush.
And save and all of these and send a thingy. And if I can find the notes document again, I'll share that with you as well.
So, Steve, when it comes to knowledge transfer, in particular on C groups, because I think there's a few folks on the scalability team that do have expertise with this design. I'd be happy to help facilitate some of that knowledge transfer. Maybe if you could connect with Rachel to kind of see what the time allocation there is and whether it makes sense to share that with the SRE team? I think it does make sense to share it with you folks.
I think it does, because at the end of the day, if we have to modify some C groups, we'd have to know what and where to modify.
Yep.
So yeah, I agree with that. I'll ping Rachel and the Epic to discuss like an official handover or whatever that we need to be doing. So yeah.
Sounds
Agreed.
great. Thanks.
Excellent.
Awesome. So thank you, Igor and Calliope, for keeping the notes up to date and the agenda up to date. I appreciate that, because I'm terrible at doing that. So yeah, I think we have a clear action plan for now, just to continue discussing async, especially on priorities. Is there anything else that's not clear for anyone?
No, this is great. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, have a nice day then, and see you in 1 minute, I guess.
Yeah.